Hello, and welcome to A Reader's History of Science Fiction, Season 3, Episode 4. I'm Alex Howe, and with me today is Larry Niven. Larry Niven is another one of the classic authors of science fiction, and in fact, I dedicated an entire episode to his work in Season 1. He published his first short story, The Coldest Place, in 1964, and he is best known today for his Known Space series, including his award-winning novel Ringworld. But he has many other writing credits to his name, especially his frequent collaborations with Jerry Pournelle, such as The Mote in God's Eye and Lucifer's Hammer. Mr. Niven, thank you for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure.
So, to start off, when did you get your start reading science fiction, and what were you reading at the time?
I think I was about 10. I may have been younger. I was hooked when I discovered Heinlein, and my parents were encouraging. They bought me a library of science fiction books that included Lester Del Rey and other classic lights. What can I tell you? I was hooked. I stayed hooked. I was better off with science fiction than I was with the Oz books. They hooked me first. I blitzed on the Oz books and kept rereading them until my mother couldn't stand it anymore. She locked them in a drawer, all the Oz books. I was most upset.
And how did you make the transition to writing science fiction?
I ran out of options. I thought I was going to be a nuclear physicist, and then I thought I was going to be a mathematician. And by the end of college, I realized I was never going to be at the top of the field. And being at the top of the field is the only real pleasure in being a mathematician. At that time, I was getting story ideas that were complete while I was in math class, graduate school. I quit graduate school and tried to write. I subscribed to the famous Writers' School, which was a correspondence course, and got about 2/3 through there. By that time, I was a selling writer, so I kind of tapered off on the classes.
And was it difficult to become a full-time writer?
It cost me about a year of getting rejection slips until I finally hit a story idea that worked. And that story idea was obsolete before it was published. They were discovering things about Mercury that I didn't know.
So this was The Coldest Place, in which the coldest place is the dark side of Mercury, because at the time we believed Mercury was tightly locked to the sun, and so it always kept the same face toward the sun, but it actually rotates slowly.
Exactly. And I was taking Isaac Asimov's word for it. One of his articles in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. By then I was hooked as a writer. That I was sure I was going to be a writer. I had cashed a check.
And would you say that Heinlein or Asimov were particular influences on your writing?
Asimov, Heinlein, Poul Anderson, Jack Vance, Theodore Sturgeon. I was ready to imitate them all. I tumbled easily to the idea that you shouldn't imitate Ray Bradbury. He is just too difficult, and it doesn't look difficult at all.
Why is that?
He has a way of implying that there's a story.
One of the reasons I asked you to come on the show is in this season, I'm trying to get a wider range of perspectives on the history of science fiction, and I think you occupy a very interesting place in it, because reading about the history of these things today, there's a certain narrative that roughly the 50s and 60s, depending who you ask, were the era of the new wave in science fiction when the genre moved away from hard sci-fi to more character-centric and psychological, sociological stories. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, it swung back the other way, and you were a major contributor to that with the known Space series. So my first question is, how much of a rivalry tension was really there in the community from the inside? How much of a rivalry between hard sci-fi and soft sci-fi was there?
The new wave was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was the only writer writing hard science fiction of the Poole Anderson variety. I had the field all to myself. I think the swing to hard science fiction might have been me.
And another part of this is in my episode covering your books, I cited you as being a major influence to take hard sci-fi in a bit of a new direction, what Brandon Sanderson would call a hard magic system, where you introduced a lot of fictional science like the hyperdrive and general products holes and that sort of thing, but then applied it rigorously. What led you to this new way of doing hard sci-fi where you invent new science and then apply it rigorously?
That's not a new notion. I learned it from, who did I learn it from? Everybody, I guess. Jack Vance, Poole Anderson, Robert Heinlein, particularly Robert Heinlein. But I pushed it a little further than most of them did. You take an idea like the Ringworld, you can make deductions that work and do math that works. There's a mathematician using my stuff, not just Ringworld, but the integral trees, flash crowd, all of these things to teach mathematics. It seemed an obvious way to write to me, but they called it Rivets with sorcery, Rivets and sorcery. At least they did when I was doing the magic stories. The magic goes away.
Did you ever read any Alfred Bester? I feel like he did sort of the same things with telepathy and teleportation.
I read a lot of Alfred Bester. I mostly remember The Star Is My Destination and The Demolished Man. He was a very good writer when he was writing with Horace Gold. I'm told that Horace Gold was the crucial element. That's Horace Gold, the editor.
Now, the flip side of the new wave was that sci-fi became more character-centric. And in one of the previous episodes, I discussed with my guest, Jim Harris, how in the Golden Age, a lot of the stories were about big ideas and there weren't a lot of memorable characters. But you, even in your early work, had more character-centric stories with Louis Wu and Beowulf Schaefer and Nessus the Puppeteer. So was that another thing that was a natural way to write for you, or was that...
That was my attempt to take on the virtues of the new wave. The new wave, they emphasized characters. They took the emphasis off plot lines, and they used typographical gymnastics. I just adopted the approach to characters.
Now, you co-wrote many books with Jerry Pournelle, who was himself a noted author, especially of military science fiction. How did that work come about?
Jerry propositioned me at the after meeting for the first VoucherCon, but we had known each other a little in the LOSFS, the Los Angeles Science Fantasy Society. Jerry said, let's collaborate. I had been collaborating and loved it with David Jarrell. And this was not a straightforward thing. Jerry wrote an opening for the Moaning God's Eye. We didn't have the title yet. He wrote an opening I didn't like because it was all military and not even the side we were going to follow. So I wrote a foreword for that, and then we wrote the rest of the novel and turned it into Lerner Blassie game. Jerry sent a copy to Robert Heinlein because they were friends. Robert Heinlein suggested we chop off the first 100 pages. That is the foreword and the military action, and made a lot of other suggestions. And Lerner Blassie game said the same thing. Chop off the first 100 pages. We chopped off the first 60 pages and rewrote the book from scratch, or at least the front part. And I wrote a tour group to a church that got the information from the forward into the book. And Jerry sold what he called Reflex, story he called Reflex. It was the military action that didn't fit A Mote in God's Eye. What can I tell you? It was a struggle all the way, but it was fun all the way. We kept outdoing each other with ideas.
And you went on to write a dozen books with him?
Yes, just about a dozen.
And I've cited Lucifer's Hammer as you continuing with the hard sci-fi. I feel like Lucifer's Hammer is the first major instance of asteroid or comet impacts getting the hard sci-fi treatment.
It may be. It may also be my only non-science fiction novel. There weren't any funny assumptions in Lucifer's Hammer, and it's all the fault of Bob Gleason, who suggested we write. Essentially, he suggested we write Footfall, and when we turned in the outline we'd written, Bob said, "Forget the alien invasion, do the asteroid impact." I made it a comet so I'd have visuals, and we went from there.
And I have to ask, are you aware of any indication that Lewis and Walter Alvarez had read Lucifer's Hammer when they proposed their theory of an asteroid killing the dinosaurs?
First came Lucifer's Hammer, then the Alvarez pair.
Right.
And I know this partly because of a AAAS meeting where Alvarez, the father, noticed Jerry with a guy he thought was me and said, "There they go. They're the ones who destroyed the dinosaurs."
And then, of course, you did write Footfall, which I also feel is one of the first major instances of alien invasion getting the hard sci-fi treatment.
Let's see. Bob Gleason called Jerry and said, the reading world is ready for an invasion of Earth by aliens in present time. And Jerry told me. And I, being a bit clueless about Bob Gleason, said, "I hope you broke it to him gently that it has been done." And Jerry said, "Yeah, but he says it hasn't been done since H.G. Wells." Well, and H.G. Wells's Martians would be in zoos within 24 hours if they tried it now. Of course, he convinced me, and we did that outline for Footfall, and Bob suggested Lucifer's Hammer. So we lost about 5 years there, but it's not lost. It was a great time. And then, of course, Bob wanted Footfall anyway.
Somewhat related to that, you and a number of other sci-fi authors were advisors to the Reagan administration on the Strategic Defense Initiative and the Citizens Advisory Council on Space Policy. And
Yeah.
you also worked with the Department of Homeland Security under George W. Bush.
Yes. That was all Jerry at work. Jerry persuaded me that Ronald Reagan was going to be president. He told me Ronald Reagan's science advisor was going to be Jerry's best student at Pepperdine, and therefore we've got an avenue for putting papers before the president. And he suggested we hold a gathering at my house and work out a space program with costs and schedules. And I said, I'll have to ask my wife, of course. And she bought it. So we held in total 6 gatherings for full weekends, including 2 that happened after Ronald Reagan left office. We generated some changes that Congress eventually put into action to harden up the laws about space travel, so that a businessman could do something and know what the legal results were. They were squishy and soft when we started. And we generated a spacecraft, or rather, we generated a rocket that went straight up and could hover sideways and land on its tail, just like God and Robert Heinlein always wanted.
Have you gotten any phone calls from Elon Musk about that?
Say again?
Have you gotten any
feedback?
phone calls from
I
Elon
haven't
Musk?
gotten any feedback from Elon Musk, no. But I don't doubt he read something of Jerry's work, or mine, or both.
But you did get actual policy movement from this group.
Yeah. And it was one of the most intense experiences of my life, the first few. I remember sitting at my computer with the lawyer, Art Dulla, just behind my shoulder. Art had written up our afternoon's work in what needs to be changed in the law to allow businessmen to enter space. And I was rewriting his work, which was read like a lawyer. He read like it was written by a lawyer, and I had to fix it. And I did. And meanwhile, there's a party going on that I really wanted to join, but Jerry made me work.
A couple of other things about your work. I had previously cited you as a possible origin for the inverse of Clarke's third law, which usually runs along the lines of any sufficiently analyzed magic is indistinguishable from technology. First off, is that one of yours?
It sounds like a principle I was using with the Magic Goes Away series. I don't know whether I actually said that. The Magic Goes Away series assumes that magic is a non-renewable resource, and that it's worn out by now, but it was just dying away in the 14,000 years ago. In the zodiac's position opposite the fish position, which doesn't mean anything, but seemed worth saying.
And of course, your largest legacy probably is Ringworld. And the Ringworld has entered the broader sci-fi lexicon and even the popular science lexicon, a lot like the Dyson Sphere did, to the point where there are actually people looking for Ringworlds today alongside searches for exoplanets.
I think they're more likely to be looking for Dyson spheres, just as Freeman Dyson suggested. A Ringworld would be harder to spot. You'd need it to be edge on to the sun.
Yeah, that there are definite challenges, and it would be easier to spot a ring world under construction.
Yeah, or for that matter, a Dyson sphere under construction. I
Mhm.
wrote a short story recently called Doubling Rate that recently, but Jerry was still alive and he said it scared him. It was a Dyson sphere being built twice as rapidly each day, or rather each decade or so, until it reached the solar system, until they started in the solar system.
So, are you still doing any writing now? I see that your last Wikipedia entry is from 2020.
I was off duty for months or maybe years. Uh, the the whatever had me coming up with story ideas sort of faded out. I'm writing now, generating books. Stephen Barnes and I have almost completed a novel, which I expect will be called Assassin, because, well, the title was laid upon us by some other people. I'm about to publish a Ringworld with some additives, uh, with some lecturing by Greg Benford, and a couple of short stories I wrote a long time ago that are Ringworld related. And there's a third book, which I hope gets off the ground, but it's a lot of fun writing because I'm not doing any writing now. We're picking stories I wrote over the previous 60 years, stories and epigraphs and epitaphs and non-fact stuff that only got published once. It's called Undertold Stories. So yeah, I'm somewhat busy, thank God.
As I said, you've got kind of a unique perspective on science fiction because you've seen it go from the magazines to the bookshelves to Star Trek and Star Wars, taking it mainstream to the point where today, 5 of the 10 highest grossing movies of all time, inflation adjusted, are sci-fi films.
Yeah, I watched all that and closed it. When, let's see, I got in about the time they were about to release Star Trek. So I followed this trend all the way, and of course loved it.
Do you have any ideas of where sci-fi is going in the future?
Let's see. Reading has gotten a lot cheaper. I've been buying a lot of books online for $1.99 and like that. The most popular books are selling for much higher prices, even online. Where is science fiction going? We're making discoveries fast enough that my type of writer can stay ahead of the field, except that everyone else is staying ahead of the field too. It's been 2 or 3 decades since I was able to be first with a story. First with a story about whatever it was. Neutron stars. I got to neutron stars before they became real, before they discovered or realized that pulsars are rapidly spinning neutron stars. I can't do that anymore, so I've got to be better than the rest, or try to be, and maybe I'm falling behind.
Talking about your work, which of your books, if any, did you most enjoy writing?
All right, it's weird, but it's Lucifer's hammer. Sorry, that's not weird. That was very enjoyable. In fact, collaborations with Jerry were very enjoyable at all times. Uh, Footfall was a lot of fun. But include Inferno. We were able to write Inferno in 4 months. rather than the usual 2 years that it takes me. The thing about Inferno was we had a map drawn by Dante and put down by Scialzi. I think I remembered his name right. Scialzi, the translator, filled his copy of Inferno with notes. And okay, we had the map. I didn't have the theological background I wanted, but Jerry did. So I went to him and made him write the book. And we had a lot of fun, but we also wanted to get out of that terrible place. So we wrote fast.
A couple questions to wrap up. First is, do you have any book recommendations for the listeners that they might not have heard of?
I think I ought to. Let's see. There was the Seascape Tattoo that I wrote with Stephen Barnes. It hasn't gotten a lot of play. Yeah. There were there was the stories set in known space by Cooper, if I remember his name right. These are 5 volumes that follow, well, Louis Wu, and the last of them follows Ringworld. I didn't allow him to write in Ringworld.
Is this the Fleet of Worlds series?
This is the Fleet of Worlds series.
Okay, that was Ed Lerner.
Ed Lerner, thank you. Oh, and something like Effington was his last name, and the book was The Goliath Stone. He wrote several stories for the Man-Sin Wars, and he's a genius. Was a genius. He's passed away, I'm afraid. But having written several stories that proved his worth, he suggested a collaboration on the basis of he needed the money. This is not a great way to offer a collaboration, but I'm always ready to do a very easy thing. Did the same thing with Stephen Barnes. I pick up a story that stalled while I was half finished. I sent a half-finished, half-written story to Essinger. Anyway, he blitzed it. Didn't communicate with me until he had written an entire novel. It's a wish fulfillment sort of thing. The guy was sickly, and his characters got to be immortal. And as for the Goliath Stone title, I would have called it microscopic something or other, because we were dealing with nanotechnology. But somebody next to the publisher wanted a novel about an asteroid impact threat. So we featured that. Let's see, you were asking about novels you might have missed. Let's see what else I can think of. Rainbow Mars didn't get a lot of play. But then again, Rainbow Mars was sort of a gift for fandom. Set on Mars with a beanstalk that's an actual plant, an interstellar traveling plant, and featuring the time traveler Rivets from the 31st century, who had appeared in earlier time travel stories in which time travel is fantasy. I decided that time travel was fantasy and went with that.
And finally, do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Several, I guess. First, don't quit your day job. If you inherited a trust fund like me, you don't need the day job. Otherwise, your day job is constitutes your ability to say off to even a good offer. Second, collaboration is worth a try. And remember, and there are only a few rules to follow. One, don't collaborate with an amateur. I've broken that one. Two, you must be able to trust each other. Three, one of you gets the veto. You decide that at the beginning. Otherwise, the book could fission off into two directions. What else? Your editor is your best unpaid servant. Listen to him. Listen to what an editor tells you when he tells you something needs fixing. Don't listen when he tells you how to fix it. That'll do for a while.
Okay. Larry Niven, thank you again.
Thank you.
This has been A Reader's History of Science Fiction. This podcast is hosted by Libsyn and is available on all the major podcasting platforms. If you like this podcast and want to support it, please consider joining my Patreon. You can find me there under Science Meets Fiction, and you can get early access to a lot of my stuff by joining. You can find my other work on YouTube at Science Meets Fiction, on Twitter, Mastodon, and Blue Sky at Sci Meets Fiction, and my website is sciencemeetsfiction.com. The next episode will be my first solo episode of the season, and I will be giving an overview of recent developments in science fiction television. Thanks for listening.